Let's create a new room/level for this new game. We are going to call it level_fighter. And there's only one of them because there will only be one room for this game. And let's switch it to the origin room for testing purposes. Like all the rooms we've created, we have to change the ratios to 640 by 360 to make them consistent. So let's import a sprite for our first fighter. So like we did before, let's do import strip image and make sure the frames are lined up. As you can see, our animation works. And make sure the frames is 10 frames per second. We want to resize it now, so let's choose percent and choose 300. Let's maintain aspect ratio as well. Now for the running animation, let's do the same thing. We're gonna do import strip image. Go to the strip image of the running animation and get each frame. Now we have our running animation and make sure the frames is 10. Also, let's size it again. Let's do percent and let's do 300%. For Fighter 2, let's do the same thing. We're going to go to import strip image, find the Fighter 2 aisle sheet, and we are going to make sure that the frames are aligned so one person is per frame using the white lines. And as you can see, we have our image, our animation. Now we're going to size it up again, and we're going to use 300 again and press apply. We are going to do the exact same thing for this player. For a run animation, get the run animation sprites sheet, make sure the frames are aligned correctly, and convert. Now we have a running animation, and set the frames per second to 10. After creating your object Fighter 1 and 2, I would suggest we just organize it by creating groups within the object folder. There, it looks way more organized. Now, if you place your objects in a room, the animation works. To add a background to a room, we need to import a sprite. So let's call it SPR_background. Import like you would usually, and let's find the background. Now we want to do, on the background layer, set the sprite to the background that we want. It looks a little weird right now, and that's because the dimensions of the photo is wrong. So in the photo, we want to make sure that it's big enough to fit the entire canvas, and that would be 640 by 360. Now it looks good, and we can place our players where we want. What I'm doing now is copy and pasting the old events from our other player into our new player. The movements are the exact same, except there's no vertical motion. This is a multiplayer game, so what we want to do is change one of the controls to WASD. And we used to have it VK_right, but now what you're going to type is ODR in brackets, the letter you want. We want when A or D is pressed, the running animation plays. So key press A is equivalent to the left arrow key. So what we want to do is set instance scale horizontal to -1 and set the sprite to running. This is very similar to what we did before, except we are adding the running animation. And then key press D is equivalent to the right arrow key. And what we're doing here is doing the exact same thing, set instance scale, except for the right keys, it's 1, 1. And then we're also setting the run animation when we press those keys. But now we look like we're running in the same spot. So we have to have a key up A and D event. So when both of those keys are up, we want to set it back to our idle animation. So now I'm setting it back to our idle animation when both of those keys are up, so when we're not moving. And there you go. Now I'm doing the exact same thing to our other player, except we're keeping the arrow keys as the controls and we're deleting the vertical movement because we only want it to move side to side. So that's what I'm doing here. Now we're doing key press left and right and setting our new sprite. Again, left is -1 in the horizontal for set instance scale, and right is just 1, 1 for set instance scale. Like we did previously, we're setting the sprite to the running sprite when we press on the key, just like so. And when either of the keys are up, just like we did before, we want to set it back to the idle sprite so it doesn't look like it's just running in the same spot. As I've said before, make sure the origin of all your sprites/animations are in the middle. As you can see, that one of the players is significantly bigger than the other. So what we want to do is make sure the scale inside the room is 1, 1. Now let's add another sprite for the animation when we press a key for an attack. So this is the exact same thing as we did before, and just make sure that they're all the same width and height so they don't shrink when you press a button or expand. The attack key for player 1 is going to be W, so I'm going to choose key pressed. W is going to play the attack motion. So set sprite to the attack, and then when key up W, it's going to set it back to the idle sprite. For fighter 2, the attack key is key press up, and we are going to do the exact same thing, set the attack motion when we have it pressed, and then go back to the idle when it's not. Let's create a new block called attack block, which will harm the player if they touch it. So let's do SPR_attack. Again, it doesn't matter what color it is because this will be invisible in our game. Remember, the origin must be in the middle. And let's create another object called OBJ_attack. And let's link the sprite to the correct one. So when key press W, you want to create a new instance for when you want to attack for this block to appear, basically. So let's go to create instance, and we're gonna basically spawn this block. We want the coordinates to be relative, but they're not gonna be 0, 0. So just like the bullet mechanism, we're gonna do object underscore fighter1 dot image underscore x scale, which will basically shoot it in the direction that they're facing. Then multiply it by some number. I chose 70, and for the y, I did -20 to make sure it was at shoulder height when it spawned. So the same thing, when we have the up key pressed, we're gonna spawn in this attack block. The same thing, object underscore fighter underscore 2 dot image underscore x scale, and then times it by a specific number. I chose 70 to make sure it's not exactly on the player, it's further than the player. And then for the y, I'm gonna say relative again and -20. I am now changing the size of the block because it was a little bit big, and as you can see, the block spawns when I press up or W. We are finally creating the health bar. So in the fighter1 folder, we will create a new object for its health bar. So object underscore f1 underscore HP. And we're gonna do a create event and assign a new variable called global.f1HP and set it to 100. That is gonna be a global variable for the health. And we are gonna use a draw event to draw the health bar. So the value is going to be the global health. And we're going to click all of these relative and change the size to 100 right and 30 bottom. And now you can play with the colors to your liking. Now place the object in the room. And when you play it, you'll see the health bar where you place the object. After you created the size and color that you like, let's just duplicate it so it keeps those settings for the other health bar, and we're going to call it object f2 HP and do the exact same thing as we did before. You really only just change one letter because we duplicated it. And now place that object in the room and you can see it. There's currently one tiny error in our game. If we load it and we press our attack button, the block that we want to attack doesn't just disappear when we're not attacking. So let's go into the key up section, and for both of them, so key up W and key up, we want to destroy the attack block. So basically when the attack motion is done, we want the block to disappear. Now it only appears when you attack. We are now doing a collision event for the block on the player, so we are damaged when the attack is done. In Fighter 1, we are going to type in the global variable of F1 HP and subtracting it by 1. Don't forget to click relative. Now we're going to copy this and simply paste it into Fighter 2 and just change that one number from 1 to 2. So object attack, paste it, so now global 2 will go down by 1 as well. Now I'm going to go to the sprite and just shrink the collision mask so it's a little bit harder to get hit by the block, so you have to be a little closer together. In each of the players, I'm now adding an effect if you get collided with the object attack. I'm basically doing the same effect on each of them, so I'm just copy and pasting from one to the other. Make sure the X and Y coordinates are relative. One last step is to create designated blocks for attack for each of the players. So this one is going to be object attack from 1 to player 2, and the other one is going to be object attack from player 2 to player 1. So they don't basically destroy themselves if they hit their own attack block. So fighter 1 has to be attacked by the block that was spawned by fighter 2. So I'm changing this collision to the other block that we just created. Attack 2 on 1. Conversely, this one's fine. Attack 1 on 2 is fine. And now we just want to basically make sure that they are creating the right block. So player 2 should be spawning the block from 2 to 1 and destroying block 2 to 1. After importing our death sprite, we basically want to create an event for that to play. So in each health bar, what you're going to do is create an if statement. So you're going to grab the if expression block. So if global.f1 HP is equal or less than 0, then we want to play the sprite of player 1's death. So that's what we're doing right here. And we're going to change it to 0.3 to keep it going. And then the next if variable statement is going to be basically at a certain point we want the sprite to be destroyed. So object underscore fighter underscore 1 dot image underscore index is basically counting how many frames it's gone through. So at 16 frames, we want this sprite to go away. So now we're gonna do destroy instance. This is basically saying at 16 frames, we want to destroy the player itself and also its health bar. We are doing the exact same thing on the other health bar for player 2. Do the if statement and basically say if the global health of player 2 is 0 or less than 0, we're going to switch it to the death sprite. And then we're going to set the frame to 0.3 again. And after that sprite has reached a certain frame, so object underscore fighter underscore 2 dot image underscore index is greater than a certain length, so 8 is basically the end of the animation, 10, then we can destroy the block. We can destroy the sprite because it went through its whole animation. So now we're destroying fighter 2, and we are also destroying the health bar associated with it. Remember to have the first if statement to be less or equal to 0. And remember that set sprite should target your specific object because it's in the health bar, not in the player itself. So set sprite in the health bar should be on the object. Also make sure the frames are relative so it keeps going through the animation.